This is how to make the Pythagorean Theorem calculator. We're going to be using something called JSFiddle. You go to jsfiddle.net. It brings you to something like this, but you need to sign in. If I go to sign in, it brings you to this page, and if you haven't signed in already, press the sign up. Sign up and get a password and everything else. Then I want to build a Pythagorean Theorem calculator. I need to have some HTML to take care of all that, and I need to have some JavaScript and some CSS, and I'll show you what all that does. The first thing I want to do is put in an image. My image, the ID is going to be a triangle, and the source, SRC, is, we're all going to use the same image of a triangle, and I have it right here. It is this, mathpages.net/Pythagorean calculators/triangle.png. So I'm going to copy that, go back to my JSFiddle, paste that in as my source. If we run that, we should see a huge triangle. There we go. Call that tri-image instead of calling it triangle, because I want to call a lot of different things triangle in here. Tri-img. Copy the tri-img, and in the CSS, I am going to write hashtag tri-img image, put width 400 pixels. You might want to play with that. If I run this, it should shrink the triangle, and it did. If I go to 100 pixels, that's 100 pixels. That's 200 pixels, and I wanted 400 pixels. That is fine. I'm going to need little text boxes to put my A, B, and C in. I'm going to make a text box called A, and it will be input. My ID is going to be, I'm just going to call this A, or A box. I think I'll just leave it like that for now. If I run that, we should see a little text box right there. I want a B box and a C box. So here's my three boxes. I want to be able to place them in different points. I'm going to put them inside something called divs. A div is a division of the screen. Div and ID equals a div. Take the closing of my div and put it after this. Tab that just to indent it a little bit. Copy and paste that. We have a div. I'm going to make a B div for my B box. I'm going to make the C div for my C box. For my divs, I'm going to move my A div around. I'm going to take my A div, copy that over here. I'm going to put a hashtag a div, open brace bracket, put position is absolute. That means that I can tell it where to go. I'm going to tell it to go to, from the top, I want it to be, let's say, 100 pixels down. There it is, 100 pixels down. This is my A div, and I want it way over here. From the left, I want it to be 400 pixels. That's not quite far enough. I'm going to do 410. For my B box, I want my B box to be here. I'm just going to copy this code, call this B div. From the top, I want that to be 200 pixels down, 200 pixels over. Now I'm going to go with 180, something like that. I want the C to be up here. Copy the A div or the B, doesn't really matter. My C div, from the top 100 pixels, from the left 40 pixels. That's not bad. I did something goofy to my B div. Maybe I need to go to 20 from the top. I need a calculate button. I'm going to put the calculate button right in the center. Here I'm going to make another div. I'm going to call this calc div. Inside that, I'm going to make a button. My ID is going to be calc. When we press this button, I'm going to write on click equals, and I want this to go to a function called calculate that we're going to write in JavaScript. When we close this little triangular bracket, which is really a greater than symbol, don't put a little slash in front of it. We just leave that open because we're not terminating the button. We are going to put a name, and I'm going to call it calculate in there. Close the button. Then if we run it, we'll see the calculate button. I'm going to tell this div to pop it right here in the center. I'm going to copy my code for my C div, and I'm going to replace C div with calc div. The calculate button is exactly up to where the C is. Move it over a bit and down a bit. From the top, I'm going to say 130. Then I'm going to move it over 140, no, 240. Yeah, that's fine. So the calculate button is in a good spot. When we click on it, it's calling a function called calculate. In here, I'm going to write function calculate. Let's try that out. In here, I'm going to put something in called a console.log, and I'm going to write we are in calculate with a semicolon after it. In JavaScript, you end your statements with semicolons. I'm going to press run, and then when I press calculate, it should, in the console, and right down here, I don't know if you can see that in this window. Let me move this up. There's this thing called console, and if you click on it, it'll show you the console window. And then if we go way down to the bottom, it says end of input. I don't see anything there. I have to put brackets here. Run. There we are. I was just missing opening, closing brackets there. When we press this button, notice what happens. It writes, we are in calculate. This is firing off. We know that this function is working. It's just not doing what we want it to do yet. I'm going to make a variable var called a box. A box is equals document dot. From the document, we're going to get an element, get element by ID. And notice we capitalize the E and the B and the I. We're capitalizing the start of each new word. That's what we do in JavaScript. Element by ID. I'm trying to get the actual A box, which I named A box like that. A box. I'm going to make a variable called B box and C box. B box and C box. Then I'm going to make some other variables, var. I'm going to call this A, and that is going to be the A box's value, dot value times 1 to change it into a number. Then I'm going to get B boxes and the C boxes value. B and C, this is B box and C box. I'm going to do some calculations. First, what is missing? Let's say you're trying to calculate C. You put in the values for A and B. You're trying to calculate C. If C is equal to 0, like we didn't enter anything into C, and notice I put 2 equals. That's a logical equals. It really means is equal to. Like you're asking a question. Is it equal to 0? If C is 0 and B is not 0, B is greater than 0, and this is how you write and in JavaScript, double ampersands. C is greater than 0. If C is equal to 0 and A is greater than 0 and B is greater than 0, then calculate C. I'm going to put that in brace brackets like this, tab that over. C is equal to math.sqrt for square root, the square root of A times A, which is A star A, plus B times B, semicolon. All right, I'm going to make something called feedback. Up here, I'm going to write div, feedback div. Inside there, instead of making a button, I'm going to make a paragraph. P. Its ID is feedback. Right now, there's nothing written in it, so I'm just going to leave this blank. Close of the P. Make a variable called feedback. Var feedback. It's just right now nothing. But if we calculate C, our feedback should be C is plus the value of C plus C. If C is 0, A is not 0, B is not 0, then I'm going to write else, check to see what if A is blank and C is not blank and B is not blank. Then A should be C times C minus B times B. For C squared, take away B squared. Our feedback should be that A is whatever the value of A is. What else? I would also like to put the value of C into the C box. C box dot value is equal to whatever the value of C is. I'm going to do that same thing for A. A box is A. Then we're going to do that final calculation for B. If B is equal to 0, C is greater than 0, and A is greater than 0, then B is the square root of C squared minus A squared. Feedback should be B is B. B box's value is B. If it's not any of these, this isn't true, that isn't true, and that isn't true, that means that you've done something wrong. You have 3 values in these boxes and you're telling it to calculate. It should give some feedback. It should say, look, you got to leave 1 blank, right? Or what if you only have 1 number and you press calculate? And you should say, well, you can only have 1 blank, not 2 blanks. I'm going to put an else, and in here, I'm just going to write feedback error. You must leave 1 side blank and fill in 2 sides. Let's run that. If I put in 3 and 4, and I press calculate, it should put a 5 there, and it did. And in our feedback, it should say, but I'm not seeing the feedback. Yeah, because I didn't tell it to do the feedback. I'm going to copy this document, get element by ID thing right here, and down here, I'm going to write feedback, get element by ID, feedback, dot inner HTML equals feedback. Let's run that. If we put 3 in here and 4 in here and press calculate, it should put a 5 there, and it does. And it should give us our feedback. C is 5. Now let's say we mess up and we have 3 values in here, we press calculate, it should say error. You must leave one side blank and fill in two sides. And we didn't do that. I'm going to lower this a little bit for the feedback div. I'm going to copy the B div. It's going to be very close to where the B div is. I'm going to replace that with feedback div. Here, let me just, for now, I'm just going to put a little bit of text in where it says feedback. I'm going to write feedback div, run. Feedback div's there. If I put it at 220, that's a bit high. Let's put 250. That's a bit low. Let's do 240, 230, 240. I like that. Pull it left a little bit. Let's say 70. There we go. Now let's remove this so it's blank at first and then run that. Good. If I do something goofy like leave them all blank and press calculate, error, you must leave one side blank and fill in two sides. All right, I should have, if this was 13 and this was 12, if this was 13 and this was 12, and I press calculate, it should give me 5, and it does, and it says A is 5. All right, and that is how you make your Pythagorean theorem calculator. Have a good day.